On Sunday, September 27th, Project Veritas posted a video in which they alleged that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar had bribed people to harvest absentee ballots.
James O'Keefe here in downtown Minneapolis at the scene of the crime. The person you're about to meet, Liban Mohammed, aka King Liban 1, boasts about the hundreds of absentee ballots in his car.
Their evidence for this bold claim was the evidence that they provided. The way that they proved it, this claim that they were making of a crime, well, they had a clip from Snapchat of a guy called Libman Osman, who they made sure to call Libman Muhammad to drive home his spooky Muslimness, driving around with a bunch of absentee ballots from sick and elderly people who had voted for his brother who was running for city council in Minneapolis, which they edited together with some other videos from his Snapchat to make it look like he had paid for the votes. Also, one of the people they featured in the video who speculates that Ilhan Omar was buying votes, a local activist by the name of Omar Jamal, allegedly offered Osman $10,000 to say he was harvesting ballots for Ilhan Omar. Now, I'm not a journalist, and I didn't go to reporter school, but as I understand it, paying someone to say something you want them to say, and then reporting that fact without disclosing that you paid them to say it is, that's fraud, right? Like, they did a big fraud. Allegedly. Now, if you're familiar with Project Veritas, none of this is going to come as a shock to you. This is the kind of thing they like to do. They come out with some highly unlikely bombshell news story that nobody really takes seriously because they get caught lying like all the friggin' time. Nobody with half a brain could take this story seriously. And now I pause for comedic effect. Here's the president retweeting it. Project Veritas are perhaps the worst right-wing media grifters in the United States, with the exception of Jacob Wohl. That's not to say worst as in they have the worst impact, they don't, but worst as in they're extremely bad at what they do. The most inept, clumsy, blockheaded attempts to create bogus narratives that always, within days, implode and expose them as the scheming frauds that they are. And it's tempting to laugh at them, and we will be doing that, we will be laughing at them in this video, but what I find very frustrating and kind of scary about these boneheads is that they manage to get a lot of attention and coverage whenever they launch one of their zany frauds. No matter how many times they demonstrate they can't be trusted, their press releases are dutifully reported by media companies who know their outrageous and undoubtedly false claims will generate a lot of clicks. It's trivial to show that they're probably lying. It's trivial to establish that they have a long history of dishonesty, often just outright paying sources to say whatever it is they want to report. The thing that's concerning is that it doesn't seem to matter. They get headlines, and by the time the corrections are issued, everyone's already moved on. Now, it's difficult to say that they're having big effects right now. Most of the stories they report tend to get shrugged off and ignored because of how unreliable they are, but what happens when one of them is believable enough to take off? And as we'll see, they've pulled that off before. And sure, they've used up most of their credibility since then, but people believe a lot of viral bullshit these days. How much time have you spent lately trying to convince your older relatives that no, COVID-19 is not a Chinese bioweapon?
We are making tremendous progress with this horrible disease that was sent over by China. China will pay a big price for what they did to the world and to us.
Seems like credibility as a means to dissuade people from believing nonsense stopped working a long time ago, and that should be pretty friggin' worrying. Case in point, Project Veritas, an activist group masquerading as a watchdog operation. They famously set up elaborate, zany stunts to demonstrate corruption in government or to fit some sort of right-wing narrative, and then deceptively edit video footage to make patently false claims. And this isn't me editorializing. They've been caught doing this several times. If you're familiar with them, it's likely because they're the assholes that got ACORN defunded in the US, which in the long distant days of 2009 was briefly a huge talking point of the Republican Party. Veritas founder James O'Keefe manipulated footage to show criminal intent by ACORN workers, while also pretending he had gone into their office in a ridiculous pimp outfit for some reason. He didn't. He was just using editing trickery. He was wearing a normal suit. I don't know why you gotta pretend you wore a pimp suit there. That seems a bit much. ACORN is a nonprofit that helps register people to vote and advocates for policies which help lower-income people. The main people that ACORN helped register to vote in the United States before O'Keefe's stunt cost them their funding were Latino and African Americans, which I'm sure is just a coincidence. And despite the slam dunk evidence that ACORN was allegedly helping this seeming pimp to hide money from the government, it turns out that most of the ACORN workers, who did not know they were being recorded, either thought he was kidding and played along, in poor taste, called the police after he left their offices, or outright refused to help. Now, a few of them did actually offer information to help the woman they thought was a sex worker report her income without getting arrested. Oh me, oh my, what a heinous crime. Well, not a crime per se, but a breach of etiquette to be sure. In several instances, they also clarified that they could not actually abet criminal activities, which O'Keefe edited out of the publicly released videos for some reason. In any case, those employees were fired the minute the story broke for having the audacity to help someone they thought was a sex worker pay her taxes. Those monsters. So that made Congress cut federal funding to ACORN, and then they were cleared of any criminal wrongdoing by independent investigators, and then they dissolved, citing a lack of funding. So that's not great. I mean, sure, a few of the workers at ACORN acted pretty inappropriately, not illegally, mind you, but the dishonest narrative that Project Veritas established, that billions of dollars in government money would be spent to help criminals evade the law or whatever, was patently untrue. Also, the number they gave for those government funds was just nonsense. Just loop-de-loops and flibberty-gibbets. To quote the Washington Post, their videos include the oft-repeated conservative claim that ACORN is expected to get up to $8.5 billion in government funds. But that's a bold exaggeration. I would perhaps use the term lie, as it includes $3 billion in stimulus funds set aside for revitalization efforts nationwide, and $5.5 billion in federal community development grants. The number assumes ACORN would apply for and win every project and grant in the country, while ACORN says it is not applying for any of the stimulus funds. This scandal put Project Veritas on the map, and while it was obviously deceptive in intent and inaccurate, it's the closest they've ever gotten to actually breaking a real story, which should tell you something. It's also like the last time they managed to get anything done, because after this everybody kind of realized, oh, hey, these guys are full of shit, and if I act on their coverage, I'm gonna look like a doofus. It is impossible to overstate how wild their lies are and how badly they manage to convey them. They pull all sorts of wackadoo stunts, like the time James O'Keefe dressed in an Osama bin Laden Halloween costume after bin Laden had been dead for several years, and trudged through a river at the Texas-Mexico border to make some kind of point about borders, like how they're insecure because there was no federal agents to be seen. Anyone, including the late Osama bin Laden, can waltz right in. Only couple problems with that story, couple little methodological errors in that little experiment. According to Adam Weinstein at Gawker, weirdly, in his 6-mile trip from the river border to I-10, O'Keefe's video never shows him crossing the well-patrolled road that runs parallel to the river, the multiple irrigation canals, the well-maintained parcels of farmland, the 2-lane Highway 192, also called Esperanza Road, or any of the other obstacles that stand between the border and I-10 in every place there isn't already a permanent outpost. You can see them for yourself on Google Maps. Why would he lie like that? Pause for comedic effect. Anyway, this investigation where he waded through a river twice, interviewed one guy and bought a Halloween costume, cost him $74,000 somehow. And he wants you to pay him back. This video cost him more than the yearly median household income in the United States. A 6-minute video where he wears a Spirit Halloween Osama bin Laden costume. That's in addition to the funding he gets from a trust set up by the Koch brothers. By the way, He gets paid to make the videos, gets paid to advertise on those videos, gets paid selling the rights to those videos to right-wing media companies like Breitbart, and then names some wild-ass fee and demands his viewers fork it over. It's like a Matryoshka doll of grifts. It's grifts on grifts on grifts, baby. It's grifts all the way down. Can you imagine the chutzpah to manipulate your audience like that? It's disgusting. And for what? Money? Clout? Is that really worth manipulating people emotionally? Oh, hey, Grumbletum. This is Grumbletum, everybody, the folksy woodland critter who eats all of my likes, comments, subscriptions, and of course, Patreon donations, and will die if he doesn't get enough. You're looking good, Grumbletum. You've been working out? No? Okay, it's just you've lost some... You know what? None of my business. You may also remember the time that he tried to set up a sting operation of the Washington Post, and... Content warning for some pretty disgusting rape apologia coming up. Skip to the time code here to avoid that. Roy Moore was being placed on the Supreme Court at the time, and it was pretty obvious to everyone that he had a long history of quote-unquote dating children and sexually assaulting women, some of whom were also children, allegedly. In an attempt to discredit his many accusers, Project Veritas set up a sting operation where they had a woman report a false claim against Moore to the Washington Post to demonstrate how they just run with any old story. One problem with this maneuver, the Washington Post has journalists on payroll, and they conducted a thorough background search by Googling the woman making the claim and finding she had a GoFundMe to move to New York to pursue work fact-checking liberal media lies. So I really want you to think about this, okay? These guys went to a newspaper to try to trick them into printing a fake story, gave a name that they use publicly to say that they're trying to trick that newspaper and papers like them online, and expected that to work. And putting aside how inept that is, just really think about the cruelty of it. Really think about what it could have meant if they had succeeded. A transparent attempt to poison the discourse surrounding a sexual predator, allegedly, being appointed to the highest office in the land. Utterly, spectacularly evil. Now they failed there because they're really bad at doing this, but whenever they try these kind of cons, the process goes the same way. Newspapers and media companies publish their salacious headline with some qualifiers like allegedly or with little evidence to protect themselves from lawsuits. Within the article that nobody actually reads, they clarify that the information came from a source with a history of lies. Then Project Veritas basks in the attention for a couple days, gets boosted by all the conservative true believers in the Republican Party, and then they get a ton of new followers, read donors, cha-ching. Days later, the story is discovered to be a complete fabrication. And somehow, all of the retweets and endorsements of it don't seem to get retracted. Rinse, repeat. To anyone with a vague understanding of what journalism is and how it works, it all seems very silly. A big foofara. But in our current media hellscape, all it takes is for a talking point to be repeated enough, no matter how little evidence there is for it, to make outright dismissing it look like an act of bias. Then, when the pundits take time to explain why it's not true, it gives the appearance of being just another thing that both sides are arguing about, further legitimizing it. What I'm doing right now, this video is part of that problem. Because all my right-wing hate watchers, and I've got quite a few, are either getting further entrenched in their support for Project Veritas, or they've just now heard of it, and the fact that I say they're not trustworthy is all the endorsement they need. They've taken advantage of the biggest weakness in liberal journalism, that nobody can resist printing an attention-grabbing story even if running it plays into the hands of dangerous grifters. And there's just something deeply Orwellian about a group whose business model involves lying to people and then lying about how they responded to your lies, naming themselves the Latin word for truth. Ah, fuck! Ah! Hello and welcome to the Eyeball Zone. Here in the Eyeball Zone, life becomes an endless string of misfortune for small projects in need of eyeballs on their work, desperate enough to walk with open arms into our web. Look, Dan Drambles is a bit of a bigger channel than I'd normally consider for the Eyeball Zone, but he told me after taking a hiatus he's having difficulty attracting back the audience he once had, and sent me a video where he, a skeleton, talked about the anti-capitalist overtones of the film version of the Little Shop of Horrors musical. And folks, you're not gonna find a more relevant video to put in front of my face in particular. You think I'm not gonna talk about that? Do you even know who the fuck I am? Though Dan, if you're watching, you probably should have opened with your video on Monster Squad. Always open with Monster Squad. I don't know how to convince you to go watch this video, because if you're not already on board, then you and I operate on such different wavelengths that it's pointless to even talk to you. Do you have a small project willing to sacrifice its individuality and submission to he that looks? Send me exactly one email with the word eyeball somewhere in the subject line and pertinent details like your pronouns, and perhaps you will find yourself trapped here in the eyeball zone. Hey, just having a bit of a spoof and a goof with this video. Hope you liked it. Please press the like button and subscribe to keep Grumbletum alive for another day. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/thoughtslime. And when I talk about that, when I talk about Damani, I want to make it clear that it's all a big joke. Don't actually worry about the cartoon guy. Let's be real here, it's a cartoon. Hey, if you want more videos from me, you can follow Scaredy Cats, where I talk about horror movies, at youtube.com/scaredycatstv. There, I release new videos every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's also the Mega Slime Entertainment Zone at youtube.com/Mega Slime Entertainment Zone, where I occasionally upload video game footage. You can also watch me stream every 8 p.m. on Thursdays Eastern Standard Time as well. It's not Thursday Eastern Standard Time, it's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You get it. Here on YouTube and Twitch, that's where I do those streams, so you can watch those. Come hang out, we'll have fun together. We'll talk to each other and have a grand old time. Do you know that this is a bit of a humble brag on my part, but the amount of people donating to the $5 and above tier on my Patreon has now grown to such a length that I can no longer fit all of the names into a text box on Premiere Pro at the font size I was using. So that's pretty great. Thank you so much. This is my full-time job, and I have to explain that anytime anyone asks me what I do for a living. And that's fun, and that's cool, and I love this.